So do you see anything that says recording?
I've got something that says this meeting is being recorded.
Okay, fantastic.
Welcome to the Legal Writing Institute on YouTube. The Public Relations, website, social media and LWIC committee are pleased to offer this new series, Professor to Professor, where legal writing professors chat with colleagues about writing, the profession, and everything under the sun. Let's meet this episode's professors. Tracy Norton and Hollee Temple.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Hollee Temple. I am the Director of Legal Writing and a Professor of Law at the William S. Richardson School of Law at the University of Hawaii. And today I am joined by my longtime friend, Tracy Norton. Tracy, tell us a little bit about your current position.
I'm Tracy Norton. I'm at Louisiana State University Paul M. A. Bear School of Law. After a very long career, I have jumped onto the tenure track, so I am an assistant professor of law. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, this is sort of exciting first venture for us into this new sort of conversation podcast thing. Joshua Jones asked us if we would just put our heads together and talk a little bit about careers in legal writing with the hopes that maybe this would be useful to someone. So we're just going to have a little chat and I wanted to start off I've known you a long time, Tracy. I was trying to remember where I think I first met you. So I thought maybe I should start just by thinking or asking about how you got into legal writing in the first place, when that was, and sort of the story of that.
Um, you couldn't reproduce it if you wanted to. Um, I was practicing law in Lubbock, Texas. I was practicing I would say probably an even split of criminal law and family law, matrimonial and custody. Um, the family law made me completely miserable. And that had always been the split ever since I got out of law school. It was about half family law, about half criminal. Family law to pay the bills, criminal because that's what I wanted to do. So the family law was it was awful. It was so much worse than I could have imagined. I really thought
Why?
temperamentally I'd be really well suited for it.
I would
Um,
think maybe too. It was just too emotionally.
oh, I hated it. I
Oh,
hated it.
interesting.
Everybody was so nasty. Like I sort of understood the clients being nasty to their soon to be ex-spouse or their co-parent and being nasty to their ex-spouse's lawyer, but I didn't understand how nasty my own clients would be to me.
Wow.
And I didn't understand how nasty the lawyers could be to each other. Like a lot of lawyers, it was pretty cordial, pretty collegial. Um, but there were a lot of lawyers. I remember saying to one, being on the phone once and saying, you realize that you and I are not getting divorced, right?
That's awesome.
We are not actually, we don't have to engage in combat.
You're escaping
So
that when you got into teaching?
yeah, so that's when so about 3 years of that was about all I could take. And I resigned from my job. I walked into the partner's office that I usually worked for. He was the one that did most of the criminal stuff. I handed in my letter of resignation. I said, I'm not going to leave you in a lurch. I'll give you a month to find somebody, but I'm leaving. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I think I want to go work at the car rental counter at the airport.
What?
That was where I was going. I was like,
People are going to be nicer there.
I didn't yeah, nicer, yeah, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that would be much better. Um so I he said, no, you're not going to do that. And then he threw my letter of resignation away, which really made me think I'm going to have to kill myself. Because I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it anymore. It was
You
too
knew you had to
nasty.
get
It was
out. Yeah.
too heartbreaking. Um, I mean, if it had been about the kids or something like some sort of marital injury, but it was just petty, horrible stuff. And I couldn't get behind it. I couldn't, I wasn't going to fight. I just didn't see the point of fighting tooth and nail and being nasty just for the sake of being nasty. And that's, I saw a lot of that. And so I couldn't do it. So he said, we'll find you something to do. And he goes, if you could have any job, what would you want to do? And I said, well, I'd like to teach. I think I like working with our clerks, and I would like to teach. And he goes, okay, well, let me see if I can find you a teaching job. And I'm like, I don't think this is how that works. We were a little, a little tiny firm in Lubbock, and he said, I go to church with a law professor at Texas Tech, and so I'll find out what we need to do. And so he went to that guy, and the guy said, yeah, actually, we're hiring legal writing right now. And he came back and he goes, they're hiring legal writing. You're a shoe-in, because I did all the writing for the guys in the firm, which was to say everybody. I was the only woman in the firm in West Texas. They couldn't write their way out of a box. And so I did all the writing for everybody for their cases in between doing my stuff. And I liked it because it seemed like low-hanging fruit, because the writing was just so bad in practice generally. And in my firm, it was atrocious. And so it just seemed like really it was easy it was something that I did. And not that I was particularly good at it. I was just you didn't have to be particularly good at it to stand out.
Hmm.
And so I ended up applying for the job, and I actually went to church with a guy who was on the faculty, and I was talking to him about it, and he gave me what was very solid advice, which was, you're not going to get one of these jobs. People prepare their entire careers for these jobs. They start the first day of law school and they make a series of decisions calculated to land them on a faculty at a law school. And you're not just going to accidentally pop into this. And I was like, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. But I got a call back. And so I went and I remember some of the stuff I said in the interview, which I won't repeat because it's so embarrassingly bad. But so I ended up being the sixth alternate. And I only knew that because of my
Sorry.
friend from church. And he said, you're number 6 on the list after the 3 we've already hired. We've got a 4th slot, and you're 6th in line for that slot, which, knowing what I know now about hiring, that means I was the least qualified person that they talked to at all.
Mhm.
And so, anyway, it was like July when I had this conversation with him. He said school starts it was like 3 weeks. He said the series of events that would have to happen is biblical in scope. And I'm like, okay. So I resigned myself. This is me going to the car rental counter. And I got a call the Friday before classes started on a Monday. Are you still interested? And
Wow.
the stuff that happened was biblical. It was unprecedented. All of those other 5 people, like, really dramatic things happened in all of their lives over the next 2.5 weeks. And
I
so
think
they
it was
called me to go,
the
and I was
universe.
like,
The universe was bringing Tracy Norton to legal writing.
yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. And so I taught my first year, and then during my first year, I had a wonderful mentor, Jane Zangline, who taught employment and ERISA and stuff like that, and labor law. And she was a really great mentor, and she was just really interested in good legal writing. And so she said, you should all join the Legal Writing Institute. And I'm like, oh, the Legal Writing Institute. And so I'm like, wow. And so I applied to be in the Legal Writing Institute. And of course, it's, yes, you have an EDU address and you teach legal writing, you're in. They were relying on the law schools to do some screening, which mine clearly had not. And so I was in the Legal Writing Institute, and then Jane said, sometime in the fall, she said, they're having a conference in the summer in Michigan, and that was the one at Ann Arbor. And I encourage all of you to submit proposals. And I think I was the only one who submitted a proposal. And my proposal was, I thought it was interesting, but I didn't think it was what it turned out to be. And I got a spot directly after the plenary on the first day. And
Wow.
there were about 150, 200 people in the room. Like, there were only like 2 slots after that plenary. So they were in my room or hearing something valuable in the other room. And so they came to my room, and I was a trial lawyer. And so this was the easy part to me. You just get up and you talk about your topic. And so I talked about it, and that was it. That, I mean, that launched a career. It's crazy to me, but yeah.
Yeah,
And I've
wow.
been doing it for, that was 1997.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long were you at Texas Tech?
I was at Texas Tech for 4 years, and then um they wanted a director, a tenure track legal writing director who was a legal writing professor. Which at the time those were hard to come by and those were great jobs to get. I applied for it. I had the support of everybody on the faculty who had done anything with the legal writing program. And so, like, in the second year, I had been made, or the third year, I'd been made the associate director. And then the fourth year was when they were doing the search. And so, um, I did get a call back. I gave, again, what I think in retrospect is a really horrible interview, and I don't blame them at all for not hiring me for it, because I didn't know anything about being a law professor. I didn't know anything about a scholarship agenda. I didn't know anything about anything. And so when they would say, "What is your scholarship agenda?" I was like, "Well, I practice criminal law. I'd be interested in writing about that." And they're like, "Well, what do you want to write about criminal law?" And I'm like, I'll know. I'll think about it when the time comes. So it was not a good interview. So they hired somebody from outside, and I had told them, they had said, "Well, even if we don't appoint you as the director, you'll be a great help to whoever we hire." And I said, "This isn't going to be a twofer. I'm either going to be the director or I'm leaving." I don't know where I got the confidence to say that, but I said it. And then they hired somebody else. And I was like, "Oh, I guess I'm leaving." So, and then it just happened. A slot opened up at South Texas College of Law in Houston
Mhm.
for a visitorship for a year. Um, I went. I loved it. They loved me. I applied for the full deal for a permanent slot the next year, and I was at South Texas for 6 years. And then we decided we wanted to move to the East or the West Coast. So that's when I went to Touro University Law Center and was there for 15 years on Long Island. And then a couple of years ago, just got tired of being cold. And so I decided it was time to come back home. So we came to my dad's family's all from Louisiana, so we came back to Louisiana.
Wow. So you've covered a lot of ground.
I have. What about you?
Well, I had kind of an interesting last year. I started in 2003 at West Virginia, University College of Law. I did a lot of different things while I was at WVU, in addition to being a legal writing professor. At WVU, I was not eligible for tenure or really much promotion. And so, while there's a lot of conversation in the Institute and just in the discipline about what we ought to be doing about that, to me, it was an opportunity. So I had small children at the time that I feel like I didn't miss anything of their childhood, which was really important to me. I wrote a book and went on a national book tour. I started doing other sorts of writing. I do some screenwriting with my husband, written books with him now, and screenplays and musicals. And I opened a salon and spa at one point. So I created a nonprofit musical theater program for kids that I ran. So I did all sorts of things while being a legal writing professor. And I really enjoyed it and felt like I was making the most of my time. I felt a little underutilized in my position at WVU, but I was kind of planning on just sort of writing it out and doing these other things when I guess it was only a year ago, which seems impossible. That there was a budget crisis, and I had been through about 5 budget crises over my 20 years at WVU and didn't expect anything of it. And then they started talking about cutting law faculty. And at the moment that that happened, I still wasn't quite a believer that I needed to do anything. And I think I called you.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. And I was like, "Come to Louisiana.
And you were
You
like,
will be
"No, you
happy."
can't just sit here. You have to do something." And I was like, "But I don't want to." And you said, "No, you're coming." And I really attribute everything that happened in this last year to you, because if you had not pushed me, I
I'm
don't
getting credit for it.
I am giving you credit for it. I think that's like an amazing thing about these long-term LWI friendships that we make. It's so important to have people outside your institution to give you a little perspective.
Yeah.
And you and I had talked, had some hard times at some of these past
I
places.
did. I did. Yeah.
And
Toro was a difficult time. They had a lot of decanal changes, and so we were getting new deans pretty frequently, like every 2 to 3 years, and that's rough because deans want to make an impact, and that usually if you've got contract faculty, the easiest lever to push is the contract faculty lever because they can't say no. And
right.
so we had a lot of that back and forth. And so yeah, I had talked to you about how I don't know how much more of this I can take.
Right. And I remember thinking, well, she has to land somewhere great. She's one of our best like national figures, and you did. And then you came back to me, and it's so unexpected. A year later, I called you and said, I don't know what to do. And you said, you need to come down to LSU and interview. And so I put my stuff together really, really fast. Our school didn't tell us until I think it was like mid-August that there was really a crisis. So we had just started class. And so I had to do everything really quickly. Came down to you a few weeks later. And then I had my stuff ready, and I really started doing a targeted search. I was like, I don't think I need to leave WVU, but if the right opportunity comes up, I would consider it. My husband's also an academic, so we've had that two-body problem. People always say, oh, if you find two spots in one place, you need to stay there forever. And
Yeah.
I think I followed that advice. And then this position opened at the University of Hawaii, and I'd never been to Hawaii. I knew nothing about it, but my kids are in college, and my husband was supportive, and we came out here. Oops, I should have turned off my do not disturb. Sorry. We came out here for the interview, and they were looking for somebody to do what I like to do, which is to start new things. They really were looking for like a completely new approach. And I think the words that the dean used was, you would have carte blanche to figure out whatever you want our program to look like. And I thought, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
And long story short, they made it work for my husband, and we moved to Honolulu in August. And after all these years thinking I would never leave WVU, here I am directing a program and in a tenure position. And, things that one thing I wanted to talk to you about was the tenure of it, because it's been such a conversation over the years. And you are the one that actually taught me or I took this from you. At one point I really struggled with the fact that I had always I wrote about this in my book, Good Enough is the New Perfect, that I had always wanted to do whatever the best thing was. And you taught me that because I could not earn tenure, you said you can take tenure for yourself by creating a career of your choosing. And that just meant so much to me. It was like someone gave me permission to say, I can continue in legal writing and not have tenure and be okay with it. And curious about your experience.
Yeah, it's funny because like I said, I wasn't trying to be a law professor when I became a law professor, and I didn't know what any of that meant. And to me, I'm a first generation college student. And so I so revered my law professors, and I was so excited to be among law professors because I have so much regard for them. And it never occurred to me, and it wouldn't if you're not in this world. It never occurred to me that there were all these hierarchies and strata and categories, and you're better than them, and they're better than this, and I got into it, and I started pretty quickly to sort of hear that and have it be alluded to on the faculties I served on, and also in the Legal Writing Institute and the Association of Legal Writing Directors. They talked a lot about status. And my perspective for a long time was, this is the best job in the world. Have any of you practiced law? This is great. And what I've learned is, especially I think where we are in our careers, it's not that this is an easier job than practicing law, and it's not even that it takes fewer hours than practicing law, depending on, what you do as a professor and what you might do as a lawyer. Um, it's different work, and it's fulfilling in a different way. And so I have always thought this was the best job in the world, and I didn't really care about status for a long time. And by the time I understood about status, I was probably about 5 or 6 years in, and that was about the time that you joined the profession. And that was when I started, people were talking about, okay, well, how do you find meaning despite the status? And how do you, whatever. And I had always been pretty vocal at faculty meetings. If there was something I felt like I could contribute, I would say something. And there were people who would always talk to me afterwards and say, "You're so brave. You're so brave." And I'm like, brave as a soldier or a war correspondent or
Love it.
a mass unit. That's brave. This is just people talking about things that don't matter that much.
Yeah, fair.
Frankly. So I didn't find it particularly brave. Now, I mean, what they were saying was it's against your self-interest. And my feeling was always my self-interest is just being able to be who I am, where I am, and being able to contribute in my own skin. And if I can't contribute in my own skin, I'm going to be miserable anyway. So I might as well go. And I've also always felt like these law schools don't belong to me. These law schools belong, I believe, if they belong to anyone, they belong to the dean. That's who was hired. Now, deans come and go. We all know that. And so you can write them out. I've done that. But if the dean wants to take the direction in a law school that I don't agree with, I can go. I don't want to be a dean. And so I don't want to make those decisions. And I don't want to talk anybody out of those decisions. I mean, So I always felt like, like you were saying about tenure, if you want to be tenured, be tenure. It's made up. It's all made up. It doesn't mean anything. And so what I used to say is it doesn't make you taller, stronger, faster, smarter. It doesn't do anything. It's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. And people would say, well, it means they can't get rid of you. And I said, that's ridiculous. If they want you gone, they will get you gone. That's not going to be a problem. And I've seen that happen too.
Well,
I've
that's what
seen
we just
tenured
saw.
professors. Yeah.
We
I've
just saw
seen
that at
tenured
WVU.
professors run out. I've seen professors who could not teach their way out of a box or write their way through a 5-paragraph essay, be on faculties for 40, 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
It's not, the labels don't mean anything. So I've always felt like, you do you.
Right.
What I need are classes to teach. So I need them to give me a group of students. I need them to give me a classroom to teach in. I'd like them to give me some support for my teaching and my writing and my service, but I don't even need that much for that. I've been at schools with an austerity budget, and so yeah, I think we get enough of what we need to do the job that you can do any kind of job you want to do. Now, I will say this, I haven't written scholarship in probably 20 years. And so now back on the tenure track, I've got to gear back up for that. And that was partly because I wasn't willing, well, for the last 15, I haven't been willing when I was at a school that was a contract position. I wasn't willing to do work that they weren't willing to pay for. And it's not that I'm not willing to walk like a duck, but when I said, if we do this, can we have a conversation? And the dean said, we can have the conversation, but there's no money and there's not going to be. And I said, well, this is employment. This isn't a hobby. And so I'm going to do what you pay me to do, and I'm going to do that well, and I'm going to throw myself into it and do that. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate decision. I made it for a long time. But now I'm back on the tenure track, and that's fine. The job is teaching scholarship and service. And so I think you have to make your own peace with it and understand that I had a colleague not too long ago who was saying, I feel like I need to go to another school because I feel like they're always going to look at me like a second-class citizen. Even if I'm on a tenure track, they're going to look down at me for what I teach. And I said, they're, snotty people gonna snot, you know? I mean, people are gonna look down at you for whatever they look down on people for. It doesn't have anything to do with you.
Yeah.
If you want to teach something that nobody's gonna look down on, I'm gonna say con law.
Yeah.
That's one that everybody seems to respect. So go teach some con law. But if you want to teach something that's meaningful to you, that's not con law, make your peace with it. It's still a job. All jobs have some aspect where you're like, well, I'd prefer if they didn't do this to me.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I've never been able to think of a job where there was less something I didn't like. You
Mhm.
know, there's about this much of what I don't like. And the schools, when I have left a school, it's because for me, not that there's anything wrong with any school I left, but for me, the balance between what I could live with and what I couldn't got out of whack for me. And so it was time for me. They were no longer a good fit for me. And believe me, when a school's not a good fit for me, I quickly become not a good fit for them. So I would go on and go someplace else where I can kind of throw my whole being into it. What are your thoughts about the tenure thing? Because you went from 0 to 100. You went from no hope of tenure to fully tenured professor of law.
Kind of. There's a little wrinkle that I don't want to get into on this conversation on this
There
podcast.
always is.
Right. Essentially, it's going to be worked out within the year, but tenure never mattered to me. I was a journalist and still am an investigative journalist. I write for hundreds of thousands of people when my stuff comes out. So I found it somewhat unsatisfying to write legal scholarship because of the 23 people that read my pieces because I'm not famous. Um, I did them to show that I could. And now, as I'm getting back into a little bit of scholarly writing, I'm really trying to. I'm still concerned about status in legal writing, and that's what I'm interested in writing about. And I'm glad that that's an option for me. I don't think I can just conjure up a lot of enthusiasm for just random legal topics. That's not where I am. um, but I also have really lost like I think there's so many people that spend their whole careers like going for tenure, but I just watched 143 tenured faculty members at WVU be cut. The one thing they say you can't have happen.
Right, right.
So while it's nice to be respected on a faculty in a way I never have been, I feel like here I am because they really wanted a legal writing expert, and I'm able to fill that role for them. The tenure of it just feels like it's nice, but whatever, I don't really care. I do remember many years though, before when I first started, I had a lecturer title. And that really bothered me after time. I just didn't ever put my signature on anything because I felt like, I don't know, it just didn't feel prestigious enough. And maybe that's just me judging things in a way that I had to get over. But I mean, I think titles do matter to people. And it took me a long time to it's kind of ironic that at the point that I finally just didn't care at all.
Mhm.
And a lot of times I would not even lead with, I'm a law professor. I would say, I'm a screenwriter, I'm an entrepreneur, and I do all these other things, and I'm a law professor, and I love teaching legal writing, and that's why I've continued to do it. But the tenure of it, it's like I had to just come to peace with it, like you said. And one thing I was thinking about this summer when we were at LWI, you weren't there, but we were having a conversation. And I felt like it was important to say, I did all the things that they wanted us to do. I wrote 3 law review articles. I published a legal textbook. I wrote a commercial book that was published by HarperCollins. No one gave me tenure because there was not tenure eligible in this line. So, like the whole walk like a duck, I feel like only goes so far. That's my take.
No, I agree. I agree. I think the thing for me that was disappointing was finding out that law professors don't have any greater sense of justice than anybody else in any workplace,
Yeah.
that self-interest is self-interest, and that a lot of law professors, um, a lot of law professors see the budget as pie. And so if we're going to increase your status, we've got to, first of all, there's this idea that there's a status pie, that if you get more status, I necessarily have to have less status, that my status doesn't mean anything. And that's sort of like, it's all made up. We'll just make up more, right? We just make up more pie. It's fine. We can all have one. But there is that sort of, well, but it doesn't mean what it used to mean to me if everybody has it. And it's like, you mean if people who look like you or don't look like you can have it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people of color. We're talking about women. This is largely women in this profession, in this field, in the profession. And so there's that. But I've been so disappointed. You know, I teach Letter from a Birmingham Jail every spring semester as we start persuasion, because I want them to see, you know, that the things I'm going to tell them about persuasion, like they're not just specific to, you know, a trial motion. And so we start with that. And because I teach it every year, that means I'm reading it a couple of times every single year. And it has been very disheartening to me to hear all the same arguments for status within law faculties made that are made for everything else, for why we can't have integrated bathrooms, why we can't have integrated lunch counters, why women can't have equal pay, why, you know, it's all the same arguments. And the few times I did sort of get some serious blowback for something I said in, you know, a faculty forum of some kind, were the times when I said, you know, these are the same arguments that always get made when we have meaningless divisions.
Mm-hmm.
And that will upset a law professor. That upsets them a lot. And then I said something like to one of the deans I worked for, because only legal writing were scheduled on Friday.
Mm.
And I said, you know, I think it's going to be problematic if somebody sues the law school that only women are scheduled on Friday. And she said, well, it's not women, it's legal writing professors. And I said, legal writing professors are all women. And she said, but not all the women. And I said, I don't know how much employment law you know, and I don't know a lot, but I did take employment law, and I know that you don't have to be crappy to all of the women if the only people you're crappy to are women. And
Right.
so, and you know, her response was, well, that's not how I see it. And I said, that's not how law works,
Right.
you know? And so these status issues are tricky because law professors who are resisting the status find themselves in these untenable positions of making arguments that they teach students are specious,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and there's not much way around it.
Well, what would you say in terms of advice to somebody that's maybe, you know, mid-career, has been somewhere that they're not eligible for tenure, and now that maybe they're at a point in their life where they could see themselves maybe moving to another institution?
Um, you know, the advice I got from a colleague at another school when I made the move to New York was figure out where you think you're going to be happy and work for tenure there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually what I did at Toro. I went to Toro. They said they were very close. It had almost passed just the year before. Right. Just by like, yeah, like we've heard that. It almost passed. It's any minute now. And for 15 years it never happened. And part of that was the economic crash in 2007 really hit law schools hard, and particularly access law schools, which Toro was. And so we were more dependent on tuition than a lot of other law schools. And so the money just went away. And when the money goes away, that's the thing. So I would say if if status and respect are important to you, and neither are, I'm trying to think why did I choose to do this? And I have to say, about once a week, I think, why did I do this? Because I could have had specialized tenure when we made this changeover to the new tracks. I could have gone to the end of the line on the professional practice track, and I chose not to. And I think that decision, I mean, for me, it's a pragmatic one of, well, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't anticipate leaving LSU. I love being at LSU. It's a good place for me to be with my family, but I don't know what's going to happen. And I've been alive long enough to know that's true. And so if I had to make a move to another law school, I want to put myself in the best position possible.
Mhm.
And so that means scholarship.
Yeah.
And so I'm not really, it's not necessarily that I want the title or the status, but if I'm on, if I'm on a traditional tenure track, then I'll get paid for the scholarship in
Right.
ways that I won't as a professor of professional practice. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to do the scholarship anyway, I'd like to be compensated for it. Um, so that's why I decided to do that. So my suggestion is a lot like what you did, which is do all of the things, be able to do all of the things. And then when you're looking around at your own law school or at other law schools, as long as you're able to do all the things, most schools aren't too hung up on what other schools called you.
True. Yeah.
And so that's why I think I mean, it is an academic job, and scholarship is the coin of the realm, whether we like it or we don't. Um, and so yeah, I think mid-career person saying I'm ready to do something, I'm ready to make a move, I'm ready for more status, more support, a school with a better income, school with a bigger endowment, because that does make a difference. LSU has, you know, has over 100 years worth of alums. That makes a difference in my day-to-day life,
Or a school that might be unionized. This is crazy to me. I'm at a school that is unionized. I'm going to get a raise every year. I
Right.
went I went years and years without getting raises.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, wow,
Exactly.
your income does kind of keep going up if they give you raises every year.
Yeah. Yeah. And those things are important. Like going to, like, I think I'd almost rather be at a union school than one where I could get tenure. Because union protection is far more helpful than tenure, and union plus tenure is very, very nice. Although, again, I had a friend run off from a law school last year because she had a big mouth and the dean didn't like it, and that was it. But yeah, I would say be able to do all of the things, be involved nationally. It really helps, I think, if you're making a move, if when you're calling, when you're applying to other schools, if you know somebody at that school, and that's one thing that really helped me. I think it's one thing that helped you is that, to be able to have people, because there were people here who worked with you at WVU a
Right.
long time ago.
Right.
And so I would say national reputation if you think you might want to make a move one day, and scholarship. Those are
Yeah, and I think even just small things like if you're a newer person listening to this, I think sometimes like being on a national committee feels overwhelming, but it's so not. I mean, you can,
I'm on all the overwhelming ones this year.
right?
But yes,
I'm on a
it
lot
is.
of them too, but and for many years I didn't do it because I didn't get compensated, recognized, or really anything out of it. But I did make a lot of friendships, and there that was worthwhile to me
Yeah.
too. But I would say for younger people or newer people, I should say, try one thing, just join one thing. And then you have a supporter like Tracy when you need somebody to say, you really shouldn't just sit there right now. Why don't you at least
Yeah.
try?
And that was a big deal for me, Holly, because we had that conversation in Washington, D.C., like, I don't, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where I was just despondent about the situation I was in. And schools will convince you, if it's in their interest to, that you don't have value. And the fact of the matter is, anybody in legal writing, if you manage to get one legal writing job, you have value and some school will see it. And it's so much about fit. It's not just about just having a job. And
Mhm.
so if you're at a place that doesn't value you, I had this little squad around me of people that I would say, I think I need I think I need to go be an instructional designer, or I think it's time to, look at the car rental places at the airport again. And I had women in legal writing saying, no, 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 don't do that. Don't do that. And so, like, I had other people, just like you did, I had other people looking for jobs for me and saying, and making phone calls saying, hey, I know somebody who's on the market. You ought to call her and ask her if she's interested in applying. And so the everybody in legal writing, if you can get plugged in, and committee service is a great way to do that. Everybody wants you to succeed. Everybody wants to help. And everybody, I find, in legal writing more than I think in other fields in the legal academy, we want you to succeed on your own terms and in your own skin, because we know there's a lot of different ways to do this, and we want you to, you know, we want you to do it your way. And there's a lot of room because it's such a new field. It's like 40 years old or 50 years old. Because it's so new, there's a lot of molds that haven't even been shaped yet.
Yeah.
And so that's great. I mean, I didn't find anybody in legal writing like me, and so I just became the person who was like me, and you just became the person who was like you.
Right, but we had each other, and I think that's
Right.
it's legal writing professors get beat up on. I mean,
A lot.
we really do. I mean, and it's so heartbreaking because we're putting so much into it, and then because we're the first to give grades and we're the first to maybe have those awkward conversations with the students who aren't doing what they need to do, then it's all our fault. And that can, after a long time, it's hard to keep going. And I think the moving around is just a lot of people feel like they can't because of family reasons or whatever it is. But I don't know. I have like a whole new lease on legal writing because of going to a new position. So I would just say to people, like, kind of keep an open mind. Um,
I like places that have lots of law schools. So when we went to New York, the East Coast ended up being a bigger draw than the West Coast because I could live in my house on Long Island and I could commute. There were two law schools on Long Island, and then there's one in Queens, and then there's a bunch in the city. And although it's a heck of a commute, there's even one in Westchester County. And so I had more career options
yeah.
while living in the same place. And that's what I like about Louisiana. Not that I don't want anybody to get any impression at all that I'm in any way dissatisfied. I love it here. But there are four law schools that I can commute to, and I'm at one of them. There's one that's closer to my house than this even.
Yeah.
And then there's two in New Orleans, and there's, East Texas. So yeah.
No, that's really interesting to think
If you
about.
think you might want to move, I'm saying don't go to University of Idaho.
Right. Or the most remote landmass in the world, the
Right,
island of Oahu, where I
right.
am. Well, this has been awesome. I feel like we've had kind of a long-ranging conversation. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you would just want to say to either the newer people listening or mid-career people? That's sort of who I thought might be interested in our conversation. Uh,
I wonder because I'm sure we have lots of newer folks. I know that we do have lots of newer folks who have kids that are the ages that our kids were when we started. Um, Talk a little bit about not, I mean, work-life balance, everybody kind of sorts out on their own, but how was it within your law school having young kids, and what kind of support did you get or not get within the law school? Like, how did your colleagues regard the fact that you were available for your kids?
That's a really good question. I generally felt supported in that I didn't feel like people were, harassing me to be there when I didn't want to be there. But I also really stood up for myself at the beginning. I very specifically remember I had a conversation with the dean after I first started, and he said, well, now that we have you here, you'll be teaching a class in addition to legal writing. And I said, oh, I wasn't aware of that. What would the compensation be for that?
Yeah.
And he got really upset with me. And he was like, well, fine, don't do it. And I'm always so glad that I didn't do it, because I just drew this line in the sand and said, I'm not impressed by the fact that I could teach some other topic. That's not, I'm already being paid less than people that are doing much less work than I am. I'm not going to just add on because that's the way it's been or because you want me to. And so I took the job knowing that it was an inferior status and that I was going to make the most of that. So whereas a lot of people on my faculty, I think, kind of wished maybe that the teaching professors would all just do the same thing and then automatically we'd somehow poof get status and money. I was not ever convinced that was going to happen, and in fact it did not. So I was glad that I made that choice. So, but I think I was pretty clear from the beginning that I was going to do my job, but I was also, going to be there with my kids when they were little. And it wasn't like we ever had a conversation about it per se in our faculty, but I mean, it certainly was a lot easier than being in the practice. I was in a big law firm setting where we would have been expected to be in the office, 60 hours a week. So that would have been untenable for the way I wanted to do motherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have a lot of conversations when your kids were little with the faculty?
I didn't. I had my first child at Texas Tech. My second daughter was born when I was at South Texas, and my youngest was born when I was at Toro. And each of those were very different experiences. Some of it has to do with the year. So Emma was born in 2000. And in 2000, I got 6 weeks off. Another professor taught my classes, but would not do any review of student work. So they were sending me home hard copies of student work. And I still had to get my grades in from the previous semester. She was born in December. It was 6 weeks old. She was,
Wow.
brand new baby, brand new mother. We had no family support at the time. And so it was bananas. And I was so grateful to have the job that I didn't want to be a problem. And I wish I had stood up, because if I had stood up for that, there's nothing they could have done but accommodate me, because the only thing worse than having somebody go on maternity leave is having to hire somebody new because somebody just quit because they had a new baby.
Yeah.
And so with my second one, she was born in late June. So there were 6 weeks between late June and the beginning of the semester. And so that was the 6 weeks I had off. And then I was back at work. With Lizzie, sometimes the universe does for you what you can't do for yourself. She was born at the end of the spring semester. All I had left to do were oral arguments. They gave me a really, really hard time about it, but I couldn't. My doctor said, you can't go back to work. It won't just kill the baby, it will kill you. And so I had to take the time off. And so I was off with her from April to August. And that was amazing. My middle daughter she just had a baby in July. She's in the Army, and she gave birth on July the 6th, and she goes back November 27th. That's the Army.
Yeah.
So if the Army thinks that you can have that much maternity, and her husband's off for the same period of time, they're both in the Army. If the Army has come to it, a law school can figure it out.
I love that. Yeah, I actually hadn't really thought back about that. I had my second one when I was teaching, and it was he came a little early. It was the middle of the first semester. I think I went right back. I don't really remember exactly, but I know I finished the semester and then I taught the next semester. Maybe people covered a few classes for me, but I definitely kept grading. I know that. I was young and energetic though.
Right. Also, my kids, probably like your kids, my kids have grown up in law schools.
Yeah.
So they're really comfortable. And, fortunately, kids are cute. It doesn't matter who your kids are. It doesn't matter, their kids are cute and people like to see kids. And so,
And now I bring my dog. So he comes to all the classes. He is the new law school mascot.
that's
And
awesome.
he sits underneath me, underneath the little table. I bring his bed. He sleeps. He's 10 years old. So I guess that's kind of a full circle moment for our conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought you were about to say he's tenured.
Oh, no, he's 10 years old. He's also tenured. They've made a special rule for him here. So, well,
All
thank
right.
you so much I'm trying to figure out how to stop this recording. Oh, I see it now. It's not quite the same as I'm used to. Well, this has been so much fun. Thanks for taking the time. And
It
I hope
has.
people enjoy this. So we're signing off. Bye.
Bye.
Your LWI colleagues want to meet you. Grab a pal and record your professor to professor video. Just scan the QR code and complete the form. We'll send some talking points, and you simply record your friendly chat. Share a link of the video with the Public Relations Committee, and we'll do the rest. Thanks for watching LWI's Professor to Professor.